Very well. Hello everyone. Yeah, my name's Charlie. As Mrs. Barker said, I used to be a student here many years ago. So it's lovely to be back, see all the changes that have happened, see how a lot of things are the same, particularly the smell in the corridors. But no, it's lovely to be back on such a lovely snowy day, and it's lovely to see all my old teachers as well. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you a bit about University Week. Maybe first I'll just explain who I am. So this is me. A very long time ago, you can see my mum's farm in the bottom corner of the photo there. That's okay, very nice. This is me when I was at St Andrews. This is me still studying many years later. This photo was taken a couple of weeks ago. This is my PhD supervisor here, who I spend all the time with. I just want to start off by saying, even though I might look a bit grown up, I'm actually still in school, unfortunately, so I've been in here a while. So many of you probably don't know what a PhD is, so I thought I'd just explain sort of my timeline to get from where you guys are to where I am now. So you start off first in primary school, in which my case that was St Andrews, studying lots of subjects, which as you'll see in a minute as a dyslexic. It was very challenging for me because I really wasn't good at English or history or anything that involved lots of reading and lots of words. And then you move on a bit in life, you go to your secondary school, in which case that was Leighton Park for me here. Then you get to study your GCSEs, so now you're down to about 11 subjects. And I kind of like this a bit because I could basically pick all the science and maths topics and stuff I was good at. I could kind of drop history and things I didn't really like so much. Still had to do English though, unfortunately. And then eventually I got to my A-levels, and this was by far the best 2 years of my life, because all I could literally do was just 4 subjects, and the only ones I was ever good at in school. So that was maths, physics, biology, chemistry for me. Really enjoy that. Then you head off to university. You first do your undergraduate degree, which sort of lasts between 4 to 6 years. In my case, I went to Imperial College in London, which you can see here. And this is perfect for me, because now you can just do one subject. You can drop all the stuff I found super hard in school, and I was just doing one thing. In my case, that was biochemistry. Then after that, you do something called a master's degree, which usually lasts between 1 or 2 years. And again, you're doing one subject, but it's even more narrow within one particular field now. So in my case, that was computational biology. So this is basically trying to model and understand biology and disease using a computer, which I found super fascinating. And now finally, I'm doing my PhD. Which basically stands for, it's Latin for doctorate in philosophy. So it usually takes between 3 or 4 years. And basically the purpose of the PhD is to try and answer one research question. So you'll literally spend 3 or 4 years just thinking about one very specific thing or question, and then you type it all up at the end in a thesis that's usually about 60,000 words. So quite long, it's taken me a while to do. And then you hand it in, and then you basically get a piece of paper that says you're a doctor. Very nice. So that was just a bit of background. What I'm here to talk to you about is neurodiversity. So what is neurodiversity? We can define it as neurodiversity recognizes the normal variations and differences in brain function that occur naturally across all of the human population. In other words, it is a recognition of the fact that we all think differently. And this is a very good thing in many ways. It's something we should celebrate, because if we all think exactly the same, it would be very hard to get anything done. As soon as some problem came up, there wasn't some diversity in the way that people thought or creatively tackled problems, then it would be very hard to overcome all the sort of challenges that we have in the world. And one of the ways that you can sort of measure neurodiversity, or forms that it takes, is usually in the form of specific learning difficulties. So what are these? These are many different types of specific learning difficulties that you can have in neurodiversity. This is just showing you a few here. So for example, there's dyspraxia, so this is sort of trouble with sort of motion coordination. Dyscalculia, so this is sort of trouble with arithmetic and maths. Dyslexia, this is what I'll have and I'll talk a bit about. This is basically trouble with sort of reading and spelling and writing and English and generally. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. It's basically trouble with concentrating for long periods of time. And there's also many other things, such as specific language impairments and autism as well. But the point I want to make is that a lot of these things are basically just labels that we can apply to better understand a particular condition that someone has, and they're not isolated, and that's what this diagram is hopefully showing here. So we can say that many of the traits in these particular things are co-occurring. So you can have many together. So for example, you might be someone who's dyspraxic, so trouble with motor coordination, but you also have traits of dyscalculia, so you struggle with mathematics. Or, for example, very common is you might have someone who's dyslexic, but they also have traits of ADHD. And to be perfectly frank, when I was growing up, everyone was sort of diagnosed as dyslexic, and now it's, people are much more aware of ADHD. So I'm pretty sure if I was sort of, 10 again and getting in trouble for throwing pencils on the floor in the classroom all the time so I didn't have to do work, I may well be diagnosed as having ADHD now as well today. So I'm just going to focus a little bit more on dyslexia. Does anyone know what all of these people have in common, by any chance? Okay, a lot of hands, golly, good. Please, someone? Yeah.
They're all dyslexic.
All dyslexic, well done. Very good. So, I hope you all know who all these people are. I'm not too old anymore. So Albert Einstein, obviously, brilliant theoretical physics, discovered many things, including relativity, and won Nobel Prizes for various stuff. He was dyslexic. Richard Branson, obviously founder of the Virgin Group business, entrepreneur, he's dyslexic as well. I think he's quite famous for still now in meetings he needs someone to take notes for him because his handwriting is too bad to do it himself. Jennifer Aniston from Friends, obviously an actress, and Jamie Oliver, a very brilliant creative chef. All these people are dyslexic. The reason I'm putting up this slide is basically to show you that just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you're stupid in any way or you can't achieve great things. If anything, a lot of these people are shown to be highly creative in their fields. So just going through formally, what is dyslexia? You can say dyslexia is a learning difference or specific learning difficulty that affects reading, writing and spelling primarily. The reason why this is so important for the rest of your learning is even if you're, say, studying biology or chemistry, the way that you usually learn these things in school is by reading, writing and spelling them. So if you're, say, particularly gifted in science or history, for example, but your dyslexia is holding you back on these key things, then it can become very difficult to learn in school. It's important to understand that no two people with dyslexia are the same, so everyone's dyslexia is different. A lot of people report when they're reading text, they see letters all jumbling around the page. I don't see that at all, but a lot of people do, for example. One of the gifts of dyslexia, that it means that you can think very differently, creatively. So this is very valuable when it comes to a number of problem-solving situations. It can make you, very valuable. But very often it's the lack of confidence that is caused by struggling in school, particularly in reading and English, can be actually more worse than the underlying situation, which is why it's really good that we all talk about it now, and you're all in such a lovely place that can give people who are neurodiverse the support that they need as well. Just that point. So just to sort of illustrate how bad my dyslexia was, really when I was growing up. So I remember when I was sort of what you would, or used to be called second form, I suppose it's now year 4, 5, something like that. I remember all being in class and we would have these sort of set reading times, and all the other kids in the class would be sort of reading books like this, like proper books about that thick, a few hundred pages. And I had to Google this, so I'll still be reading these sort of kids' books. Biff and Chip, is that something that's still around? Yeah, and then the name. I thought it was just Biff and Chip, it turns out it's Biff and Chip and Pippa. But anyway, but I was still on these, and that was, that definitely affected my confidence in school at the time. I also had a real struggle with learning foreign languages, let alone English as well. So I tried French for many years. I think my total school career, I had about 10 years worth of French classes. And as Mr. Howard might be able to tell you, I wasn't particularly great at that as well. But thankfully, as I sort of got older, I sort of realised that I was sort of never going to be able to learn this language, and I was able to give that a pass. Similar with German, I think I studied German for 1 or 2 years here. And then that didn't really work either, so Andrews was very supportive actually in allowing me to drop German classes because he knew it was holding me back, and I think I had extra LS lessons instead, which was very nice. And weirdly enough, as I got a bit older, sort of a few years older than you guys are now, I actually studied Chinese Mandarin for many years. This actually went okay, believe it or not. I did alright at this, I did it up to GCSEs. I think there's a good difference here. I mean, you notice all these characters, they're very visual. I think it's highlighted in many different ways that people could learn. So as you maybe know, there's lots of different ways we could learn. So some people tend to be more auditory learners, so they learn best by hearing things, or they tend to be more kinetic learners, so they learn by physically doing things with their hands, or they tend to be visual learners, and I think I'm much more of a visual learner. Believe it or not, all the writing in plain characters in French I could never do it at all, but all the pictures with the characters in Chinese was somehow something I was reasonably okay at, and I got an alright GCSE grade by the end of it. The other very important thing to understand is if you're neurodiverse, is just to appreciate that the way that your brain learns might be different to how you're necessarily taught in school. So the biggest piece of advice I could give you all is basically to learn how to learn. So usually in school, a lot of things are taught from textbooks. That didn't really work too well for me. As I sort of got older, I eventually appreciated that these. You guys know what these are? Mind maps? You seen them before? Yeah, good. This is really great for me because again, it was quite visual for subjects like history and geography, where there was just a lot of facts and text to learn. This is a really good way of sort of organising things in my brain, and basically most of my GCSE exams were done based on these things here. Mathematics as well, and science was something that I eventually began to appreciate was my strong suit, and I began to focus on that. And also learning learning to program computers as well. Do any of you know Scratch? Have you used this? Okay, oh wow, brilliant. Okay. That people say that people are scared of AI taking their jobs. I'm scared of you guys taking my job. You're learning to code at such a young. Do any of you code in Python? So a few hands up. That's pretty good. Okay. Well, amazing. Well, if you don't know, Scratch is basically a programming languages. It's basically very visual. So instead of writing code and text, you basically have these sort of code blocks here that you can drag and drop things together to make them code. And in the sort of, I know some of you need to go soon, so I'll wrap up this section. Through the sort of help and learning support that I got through so many fantastic teachers like Mrs. Barker and Mrs. LaRue, who are both still here, it's amazing. I now went from struggling to sort of read books like this, and as I got older I actually rediscovered sort of my passion for history, so these are the sort of things that I read now. I took this photo in Cambridge yesterday, this is my bookshelf. Mostly history books. And then for my job, I sort of need to read research papers about science that people have published. So this is actually my latest paper, and I'm very proud about it. So as you can see, very different. Just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you can't overcome these things. Right, amazing. So yeah, now I sort of got the main message out the way. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what I actually do. It takes a bit of a while to explain. So I like to call myself something between a computational structural biologist and a machine learning scientist. So what do those involve? So, what is structural biology and drug discovery? So basically, what structural biologists try to do is study how life works at the molecular level and all sorts. So most of you have heard of sort of cells. Right, so the sort of basic building block of life. If you zoom down with a very powerful microscope even more, you see in finer details, you see that these cells are made up of individual compartments, and then all of those compartments are themselves made up of these beautiful and very big molecules. that we can call proteins. This diagram here is showing you a protein as well. And you can think of proteins kind of like these biological nanobots that do functions within your body. Structural biology is really about understanding how the structures of these proteins, given their function, and make you healthy, or when they sometimes go wrong, that can lead you to have a disease. And this is very closely related to the field of drug discovery, so basically making medicines. So basically all a medicine or a drug is just a molecule that some scientist has made based on the knowledge of some protein structure like this here to hopefully cure your disease. And then the way I try to model this is using something called machine learning and artificial intelligence. Definitely when I was your age, I had no idea what artificial intelligence would have been, but I know it's becoming a lot more popular recently. Incidentally, just put your hands up if you've heard of something called ChatGPT. Blimey. Okay. Well, when I was doing a talk at Cambridge, I asked everyone to put their hand up if they do that, and then I said, and keep your hand up if you've used ChatGPT for some of your Cambridge work, and then there was a lot of hands up like this. I won't do that for everyone here. But you're obviously all aware of it. And was this something that was surprising to you, or quite shocking, just how good it was, would you say? A few nods or shakes? Or... Yeah? Very cool. So yeah, really, this doesn't show too well, unfortunately, but here's an image of a recreation of what is happening inside of a cell. So each of these different blobs here are proteins. This sort of wall here, you can think of it as a cell wall or membrane, and this just really is to show you the sort of complexity of these biological systems that we're trying to model and understand, in my case, using machine learning as well. And before I go forward, I just want to give you a quote from Steve Jobs, who some of you probably all died. He died before all of you were born, probably. He was a fan of Apple, basically made stuff like this. But he said, I think the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be the intersection of biology and technology. A new era is beginning. And this is really where I work. This might all sound very confusing, but I don't actually work in the lab at all. I just work at a desk, so I'm a purely computational person. So this is my screen. I usually work with two screens. And like I say, this is the machine learning part. This is where I have all my code. Here, and I also launch experiments. And then this is the biology part. This is where I sort of look at results and interpret things that the machine learning experiments have done. But this whole thing, machine learning, sounds very difficult to understand and mystical, so I'm going to try and demystify it a bit. So I like to say, simply put, machine learning is about teaching machines how to solve problems we otherwise might not be able to solve by allowing them to learn important features from data. How might that work? Suppose I have this set up here. What we do is we have some sort of model. We have some sort of model, and this is what we call an artificial neural network. So as you might be able to understand, it's obviously heavily inspired by the brain. So you see each of these circles here are basically nodes. Kind of think of them like the nodes in your brain. And each of these wires here are basically the neurons in the neural network. So think of them as sort of connections in your brain. The important thing is that we can actually change the connections in this model by doing something that we call learning. So how might that work? So we have a data set of, in this case, images of cats and dogs. And the important thing is we have labels for each of these images, so we know what's in them. How might we be able to train this neural network model? What we can do is bring along one photo, suppose a photo of a dog. We basically input that photo into the model, and it's going to make some prediction about whether it thinks there's a cat or a dog in that photo. And now because we haven't trained this model at all, obviously we would expect the output or the prediction by the model to be total rubbish. So basically as good as random. In this case, it thinks 52% dog and 48% cat. Obviously this is very wrong. We want it to be 100% dog. But because we know what the labels, what the sort of ground truth label of that image should be, what we can do is calculate basically the error that that model had. So we can minus 52 from 100, that gives us our error, which is 48 in this case. And now we have this error number that we want to basically minimize. Pardon me. I'm basically doing some very fancy math. We can figure out how to change the connections in this model to hopefully minimize this error number. So we'll do that, we'll calculate the error, change some of the connections, bring along another image, this time of a cat, and with the model we'll make a new prediction. This time it's 76% confident that it's a cat, so we're getting slightly better, but still not perfect. We calculate the error, figure out how to change the connections in the model, and repeat this over and over again until hopefully we converge on a model that has been very highly trained, so in this case 95% dog. Well, one of the points that I want to make is that these neural network models, they can't just classify whether an image contains a dog or a cat or not. They're actually very useful for a broad range of tasks. So we call them, this is what we call universal function approximators. So basically, given any problem that relates some input to some output, these models can basically learn sort of like a function or an equation that describes how they relate to one another. And in my case as well, this could be useful for, say, does this drug molecule in any way cure or inhibit cancer cells in some way, for example. So that's kind of it, really. The closest ones I had. Going back to neurodiversity, if you suspect you're neurodiverse or you have some sort of specific learning disability, you're really lucky, you're in a really good environment to do this. The learning support here is very excellent. Speak to your teachers, speak to your parents, get some sort of assessment. The lack of confidence that can result from a specific learning disability, difficulty, can often be worse than the actual difficulty itself. Going back to that slide earlier where I had all the mind maps and stuff, basically learn the way that you learn best is the best piece of advice that I could give you. And finally, it's a cliche, but find what you're passionate about and work very hard on that. So yeah, that's all really. Thank you very much for listening.